We're going to explore how architects take the chaotic, like massively complex reality of a building and just strip it down to pure, understandable logic.
Because that's what they do, right? They make sense of the chaos.
Exactly. Now, to ground this, I want you to think about the last time you stood in the atrium of a colossal modern building.
Oh, yeah, like a huge airport or something.
Yeah, an international airport or maybe a sprawling contemporary museum. You look around at the intersecting escalators, the overlapping levels, the sheer overwhelming scale of the glass and steel.
It's dizzying.
It is. And you just wonder, how on earth did anyone even begin to organize this? Especially when you are, just trying to find Terminal C, and the physical reality of the building feels completely impossible to mentally hold together.
Right, and as a visitor standing in that atrium, you are experiencing the absolute peak of complexity.
Oh, for sure.
You're getting hit with every single design decision simultaneously. I mean, the material choices, the structural supports, the lighting design, the HVAC systems, it is all just visually crashing into you at once.
Which is a lot to process.
It's a ton. But that finished building is just the final visible moment in a very long chain of thinking.
Right.
Long before a steel beam is hoisted or a concrete foundation is poured, that sheer complexity has to be managed. It has to be tested and communicated. And the secret weapon architects use to wrangle that chaos is the architectural diagram.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because to really get how powerful this tool is, we kind of need to define what a diagram actually is by talking about what it isn't.
That's a great way to look at it.
So if you think about a traditional architectural floor plan, it's essentially a highly detailed top-down photograph.
Right, of the proposed building.
Exactly. It shows you the physical reality of a proposed space. It maps out the exact thickness of the walls, the swing of the doors, the precise dimensions of a room.
Very literal.
Right, but a diagram operates more like an X-ray. When you get an X-ray of a broken arm, you don't see the skin, the pores, or, a tattoo on the person's shoulder.
No, of course not.
The machine cuts right through the noise of appearance to show you the skeletal structure underneath.
That's exactly it. The floor plan aims to communicate a full condition. It ties itself to physical realism to tell the builder exactly what is there.
Yeah.
But an architectural diagram, by contrast, is a reductive tool. It deliberately removes dimensions, it suppresses material details, and replaces physical elements with abstract symbols.
Like colored zones or directional arrows.
Exactly. Taking the museum example from the source text. If you look at a full technical floor plan of an art museum, you're looking at every single gallery, every partition wall, the fire exits, the utility closets.
Which is just a massive, noisy amount of information.
It really is. But if an architect produces a circulation diagram of that exact same museum, the walls and doors completely vanish.
Oh, wow. Just gone.
Just gone. The drawing simply uses a thick, continuous line or an arrow to show the visitor path. It highlights where you enter, where you're meant to pause to view a key exhibit, and the route you take to exit.
So, by removing the physical walls, the architect forces you to look solely at the movement.
Precisely.
It's no longer a drawing of a building. It's a drawing of an experience.
That's a great way to put it.
Which means that because diagrams are so selective, they're inherently interpretive. I mean, the creator isn't just neutrally recording facts.
Oh, not at all.
By choosing to show the visitor path and actively hiding the partition walls, the architect is constructing an argument.
Right. They're making a definitive statement about what is most significant for that specific conversation.
Declaring that right now, the flow of people is the only logic that matters.
Exactly. And this brings us to how architects actually deploy this reductive tool to solve the multi-layered puzzle of designing a building.
Because it is a massive puzzle.
It is. The source text breaks this down into 3 core layers of logic, where diagramming is essential. Concept, process, and spatial logic.
Okay, let's start with concept.
Right, so starting at the concept layer. In architecture, a concept is not just a catchy theme or a mood board.
Like it's not just a Pinterest board of vibes.
Exactly, no vibes here. Well, maybe some vibes, but primarily it is the fundamental guiding idea that organizes the entire physical project.
Okay.
But bridging the gap from an abstract idea to a concrete building requires translation. And concept diagrams explain exactly how that transition happens.
So if I'm tasked with designing a building on a, severely steep rocky hill, my concept diagram wouldn't start with a drawing of a finished house.
No, it wouldn't make sense to start there.
Right, it would have to show the logic of conquering that terrain.
Right.
So I imagine the first frame is just a single diagonal line representing the slope of the hill.
Yes.
The second frame might show flat horizontal cuts into that slope, representing terraces. Then a solid block is placed on those terraces, but the next frame shows that block being sliced open in the middle to create a courtyard, basically letting the hill breathe.
And the final frame might show an angled roof lifting up on one side to funnel southern sunlight down into that newly created courtyard.
Oh, I see.
So rather than presenting the final architectural form as if it just magically dropped from the sky, the concept diagram acts as a storyboard.
It reveals the step-by-step reasoning behind the form.
Exactly.
Okay, wait, I have to push back here.
Sure, go ahead.
Aren't concept diagrams sometimes just empty marketing fluff? I mean, I have definitely seen design presentations where an architect draws a few colorful amorphous bubbles Add some sweeping dynamic arrows that don't really seem to point to anything in particular.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
Right, and then they slap the word concept on the slide
Yeah.
and try to sell it as some profound stroke of genius.
What's fascinating here is that the source text explicitly warns against exactly that trap.
Really, so it calls that out.
It completely calls out this kind of superficial branding. If a diagram is just decorative rhetoric-like, if it relies on flashy bubbles and arrows that do not actually explain how the idea manipulates the real physical architecture, it's a weak diagram.
It's an illusion of logic.
Exactly. A strong concept diagram must be directly tied to the actual spatial and formal decisions of the project. It has to earn its keep by visibly explaining why a wall is curved or why a roof is pitched.
So it can't simply be graphic window dressing used to dazzle a client.
No, it has to do the work.
Okay, so the concept diagram establishes the foundational idea. But an idea rarely survives contact with reality without changing.
Oh, almost never.
Right, like client budgets get slashed, structural engineers point out that gravity exists.
Annoying, but true.
Yeah, zoning laws get in the way. Which brings us to the second layer process, the logic of how a design survives and evolves.
Right. Architecture is never created in a single unbroken stroke of inspiration. It develops through endless iteration, testing, and just agonizing refinement.
Sounds exhausting.
It is, and a process diagram communicates this evolution. However, it is not a literal chronological timeline showing every single minor tweak the architect made over 6 months.
Because doing that would just recreate the chaotic information overload we use diagrams to avoid.
Exactly.
It has to be highly edited. It's curating the story of the building by highlighting only the meaningful turning points.
Yes.
Like, it shows the exact moment a square courtyard had to become circular to save a historic tree on the site. Or where competing conditions, like wanting huge windows for a view but needing solid walls for insulation, were finally reconciled.
Right. The architect performing this edit is exercising intense judgment. Out of hundreds of trace paper sketches and chipboard models, they isolate the 3 or 4 steps that fundamentally change the project's trajectory.
Wow, that's a lot of filtering.
It is. And once that iterative process yields a finalized form, we reach the third layer discussed in the text spatial logic.
Okay, spatial logic.
This might be the most crucial role of diagramming, because buildings are structured by invisible relationships.
What kind of relationships?
Well, public versus private, open versus enclosed, solid versus void. These relationships govern how a building actually functions for the humans inside it. But they are incredibly difficult to spot in a dense, heavily layered floor plan where every wall is drawn with the same line weight.
Oh, I see. Because in a standard floor plan, a load-bearing concrete wall looks just as important as a flimsy partition separating 2 toilet stalls.
Exactly. The hierarchy is visually flattened.
But a spatial diagram pulls that hidden hierarchy to the surface.
Yes, it does.
So if we were looking at a massive high school campus, a program diagram might use simple, heavy color coding to reveal that all the quiet, focused study areas, like the library, the testing centers, are clustered tightly together on the north end of the campus, completely buffered from the loud, active social zones like the gymnasium and cafeteria on the south end.
And you could easily miss that brilliant organizational logic if you were staring at a technical drawing cluttered with hundreds of individual desks, locker banks, and doorway swings.
Because it's just too much detail.
Way too much. The spatial diagram strips away the furniture and the doors, and it uses visual weight and color to make the underlying organizational relationship instantly legible.
That makes so much sense. But this raises an important question. How does an architect decide what to keep and what to throw away to achieve that clarity?
That is the big question.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if a good diagram is entirely about reduction-like, about stripping away the noise to show these clear spatial relationships, then the simple act of deciding what to leave out is actually an exercise in architectural criticism.
Oh, absolutely.
To diagram a building is to aggressively filter reality. It forces the creator to look at their own work and identify what is truly, uncompromisingly essential to the project.
And the source material discusses the immense difficulty of finding the Goldilocks zone of reduction.
The Goldilocks zone.
Yeah, a successful diagram omits enough information to reveal the desired relationship clearly, but it retains just enough context so the architecture remains recognizable.
Okay, so what happens when an architect misses this balance?
Well, if a circulation diagram is stripped down so severely that it consists of nothing but floating arrows in a white void, the viewer, whether a client or a contractor, has no anchor.
Right, they have no idea what part of the building they're looking at.
Exactly. But conversely, if the architect is too timid to reduce the drawing and includes every floor tile pattern and ceiling fixture, the arrows simply disappear into the visual noise.
Which makes the graphic design of the diagram just as vital as the architectural thought behind it.
100%.
A diagram lives or dies on its graphic clarity. The text points out that clear line hierarchy, consistent symbols, and a very limited purposeful use of color are non-negotiable.
And a very common mistake, honestly, among students and professionals alike, is making diagrams visually complex in the desperate hope of making them look more intellectually sophisticated.
Oh, like trying to look smart by making it confusing.
Yes. But a crowded diagram communicates less. The text observes that the very best diagrams often feel almost obvious the moment you see them.
Oh, I love that.
Right. The architectural idea wasn't trivial. The graphic language was just so perfectly refined that the logic became universally accessible.
But the value of these drawings isn't just in presenting ideas to other people. Architects use them constantly while they're still in the trenches, trying to figure the building out.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, diagrams serve as brutal diagnostic tools during the design phase.
Brutal diagnostic tools.
Yeah, they are not just post-rationalizations created after the building is figured out. They are active instruments used to test whether an evolving scheme actually makes sense.
Okay, so it's like checking the vitals of the design to make sure it's actually alive and functioning rather than just looking pretty.
Exactly. Imagine an architect produces a 3D perspective rendering of a proposed museum lobby.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
In the rendering, the light is filtering gorgeously through a skylight, the marble floors look stunning, and the space feels incredibly dramatic.
Sounds beautiful.
It is. But when the architect steps back and tries to draw a simple circulation diagram of that exact same design, they realize the visitor paths cross over each other awkwardly.
Oh, whoa.
The route to the ticket counter loops back confusingly on itself, and the flow is just a tangled mess. The visual beauty of the rendering lied to them.
Wow. The atmosphere covered up the structural failure.
Yes.
But the diagram forces absolute honesty. It diagnoses the fundamental flaw, revealing that beneath the gorgeous marble and lighting, the core organization is failing.
Right, because if the circulation diagram is a tangled knot, the physical experience of the building will be deeply frustrating.
Because you'll constantly be bumping into people trying to find the ticket counter.
Exactly. During moments of profound design uncertainty, stripping the project back down to a diagram clarifies what the core idea actually was supposed to be.
It highlights what has become unnecessary clutter over months of tweaking.
And dictates what must change for the design to regain its coherence.
So what does this all mean? If diagrams are these perfectly logical, ultimate diagnostic tools that cut through the noise, what are their blind spots?
Yeah.
What are they fundamentally failing to capture? Because, pure distilled logic isn't the entirety of why we love a physical building.
This brings us to the inherent limits of the diagrammatic method, which the essay outlines very clearly. Because diagrams are reductive, because their entire superpower relies on aggressively stripping things away, they systematically erase the lived sensory experience of a building.
The human element.
Right. The phenomenology of architecture vanishes in a diagram.
So a diagram might perfectly explain the logical gradient as a visitor moves from a loud public lobby into a hushed private reading room. It can draw an arrow showing that transition, but an arrow cannot show the smell of old timber in that reading room.
It cannot capture the acoustic echo of footsteps across a grand terrazzo hall.
Right.
It cannot communicate the sensory softness of morning light pouring through a frosted window, or the emotional weight of a heavy steel door closing behind you.
Man, that's so true. The atmosphere, the texture, the temperature, all the tactile realities that make humans actually connect with a space are blind spots to pure logic.
The diagram is the brain of the project. It maps the intellect, the structure, and the organizational clarity, but it is not the soul of the building.
To capture the soul, you have to pair the diagram with other representations.
Exactly.
The highly detailed floor plans, the atmospheric 3D renderings, the physical wood models that you can actually touch.
Because architecture is a balance between rigorous logical organization and visceral sensory composition, the diagram just carries the weight of the logic.
The visual tools an architect uses must be as varied as the human experience of the building itself.
And the diagram is an exceptionally powerful lens, but it is only one lens.
As we wrap up this deep dive, let's pull this framework out of the architecture studio and apply it to you, the listener.
Because it applies to everyone.
It really does. You don't have to be designing a skyscraper to benefit from this way of thinking. What we've been unpacking today, the art of architectural diagramming, is truly just a masterclass in visual thinking and complex problem solving.
It really is.
Whenever you face a massively tangled problem in your own life, whether you are trying to reorganize your company's deeply flawed workflow, planning a multi-tiered personal project, or even trying to untangle a complicated financial decision, think like an architect.
Use the X-ray. Strip away the distracting noise of appearance. Abstract the problem down to its barest components.
Right.
Ruthlessly decide what is truly essential to your goal and map out the core logical relationships.
Be willing to edit out the fluff to find the actual honest structure of the problem you are trying to solve.
And, the essay points out that diagramming trains students to see the hidden order of existing buildings, which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought to carry into your day.
Oh, I love this part. What is it?
The next time you walk into a complex space like your sprawling corporate office, a massive grocery store, or a grand civic museum, look past the brick, the glass, and the surface decorations.
Okay.
Try to see the invisible spatial diagram governing your movement in that exact moment. Look at the width of the aisles, the placement of the lighting, the choke points at the register.
Hey, pay attention to the layout.
And ask yourself, are you making entirely free choices about where to walk, or are you simply following the intended arrow in an architect's unseen circulation diagram?
Oh, wow. It is entirely possible we are all just arrows in someone else's system.
It really is.